Hello listeners, my name is Esther Smipa from Speaker Hub. Speaker Hub is Europe's fastest growing network of speakers, trainers, moderators, and webinar hosts. We help connect speakers with event organizers across Europe. In this series of podcast interviews, we feature some of our VIP speakers, and they talk to us about their expertise in projects, as well as share ideas on how to become better communicators. Today I'm talking with Baldwin Berges, and Baldwin is the founder of BD Insider, a company which helps organizations connect with their audience and strategize their communication for the future. He's going to talk to us about the future of digital marketing, as well as share ideas on how companies can start building more human connections with their audiences. So Baldwin, tell me, how did you get started with marketing?
Well, I grew up in the investment management business, and somewhere, I think it really started 6 or 7 years ago. I noticed that the world was changing very, very fast because I used to be in business development for investment management businesses. So I used to run around the world to go and find investors. And there was a time when this was a pretty straightforward process. So we'd have the investment proposition, we'd be close to it, we'd be the source of information. And so investors were usually quite happy to see us because we were sort of their main source for whatever was going on in markets, and we'd share the ideas of our investment managers and so on. And then I think when technology started arriving, the internet and so on, I just noticed that these people were getting smarter and smarter. So access to information wasn't really that important anymore. And that also got paired with I think. All of a sudden the world markets opened more because of this connectivity. So, there were more people like me running around the world, and it was increasingly difficult to stay top of mind of these people. So I'd come back every 2 or 3 months, and it felt like I had to start over. So I started experimenting with. I built a web page for my investment management business, and I started sharing insights there. And so it started with a blog, first separate from the webpage, and I put it in the webpage. And I started getting really creative with the way I would provide information. And so I started using animations and things like that. And it made a tremendous difference because I noticed that increasingly I didn't really have to keep showing up. And as the list grew and the audience sort of became more and more constant, I felt like we had a way to sort of keep our investors up to date and find new investors. People would find us through our content, and I started experimenting with, writing on LinkedIn and things like that. So, the content marketing actually started working. And so I did this because I had to. It was just very difficult for me to keep on, and the world became bigger. So I kept going to more places, running around, and it just wasn't sustainable anymore. So it actually turned out that the industry sort of saw what we were doing, and other fund managers would call me and say, "This is really cool, and how does that work, and this and that." And before I knew it, I was just helping them I was sharing my strategies with them, and I was kind of like, because I'm so passionate about it, showing them how it works. And then all of a sudden I said, like, hold on, wait a minute, I think I have a business here, right? The rest was history, I guess, when people started to ask me to help them out. And I like that so much that it eventually became my livelihood.
And what is it that you love about it? What makes you feel passionate about marketing?
I've always been quite fascinated with technology, and what I find, I still have to pinch myself that you can be on the same screen visually with people from all over the world at once. I have business relationships, close business relationships of trust with people that I've never met in person. We do business together. I find that fascinating. I find individual connectivity. I think that's extremely powerful. And I think we've only begun with this. So I guess it's the world is a bigger but smaller place, if that makes sense.
I think it does. That we have the ability to be more connected, but be very far apart at the same time.
Yeah, and this is also what I love about this connectivity and this online world that we're now in is I also consider myself to be quite creative. I actually studied arts before I went into investments. And so to me, this is like, I can roll in the mud when it comes to creativity with this, You can experiment with so many mediums. You can immediately figure out what works. I love making videos. I do a podcast. I enjoy writing. I enjoy making infographics, all those kind of things. So I find it extremely creative thing to do.
And when you're using all of these different mediums, you're kind of juggling between them. How do you decide, okay, this content would be best displayed as, or I could get this idea across using, how do you make that decision?
It's not easy. You have to experiment all the time. You have to test, because some people are traditionally readers. It's the way they absorb information. Some people just really can't pay enough attention to read more than 200 words, and you have to resonate with them in other ways. You just have to see what fits best. And it's not because videos are so cool that everybody's going to enjoy using those. For example, to me, a big surprise was in the investment management world, podcasts were amazingly effective, and I really wouldn't have thought this. But yeah, there's so much you can do. It's very difficult to generalize.
Baldwin, can you tell me a little bit about BD Insider?
Yes, of course. So BD Insider is that accidental business that grew out of my own marketing efforts, modern marketing efforts, and helping others. So BD Insider really does two things. I help other businesses. What it's come to is I help them position themselves better as a company in a hyper-connected world. So I help them to use technology to make human connections, and I help them to use technology to stay top of mind with their target clients and with their target prospects. But I also have an online training program under there. So the way it typically works is if the assignment is if a prospect has enough of a budget to really get to work with me, then I will work directly with them. But there's also a whole all my knowledge is also available in the form of online courses. So it's a bit of a hybrid. I'm really there to help people and their businesses make a human connection with technology to attract more business. And secondly, it's also about helping businesses adapt their business models to get more creative with technology, because the world is evolving exponentially, and it's going so fast that before you know it, you may actually become invisible in this hyper-connected world.
Okay. So we see this when people actively decide not to be on social media, and they think, oh no, we'll do this traditional way. Well, in fact, you might just get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, I mean the thing is it's almost okay. Let me try to explain this. So if you take two companies, one company that really clings on tight to the status quo of still insisting on having personal relationships and always doing things in person, compared to a company who's figured out how to stay top of mind with people virtually. If you just compare the competitiveness of those companies based on the cost structure of how they do business, the people who still get on planes all the time and travel around, they're not going to be able to compete with these people who know how to do this more virtually, because their cost structure is a fraction. And so, I think that's not really at play yet, but it will be before we know it.
So you've talked about how there's lots of different ways that you can make these connections. How do you help a company figure out what's the best way to start?
Well, I think my favorite exercise to start with always is do a website makeover, because your website is in itself a very cleansing and refreshing exercise. The first thing I teach people or companies how to do is I always add people, because I sometimes work with professionals who put their own personal brand out, right? That also happens. So your website is not about you. It's about the experience of your customer or the visitor. And so often just starting there is an amazing transformation for businesses, because they all of a sudden they have to look at their business from the viewpoint of that visitor, of that customer. And more specifically, I force them to figure out who their ideal customer is, who they really want to work with, because that's the website, that online identity, it's got to resonate with those people. So often businesses say like, oh my God, this gives us such a sharper perspective on who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. There's so many things that matter to us, but really do not resonate. So redoing that website is a great start. And then from there on, it's you've identified your ideal customer, you've made a website for them, and then then you start telling that story so it resonates, both with yourself, because that's still important. You can't make things up. but tell your story so it resonates with that ideal customer. And so once you get that going, most of the rest really comes naturally. That's when you figure out what the best mediums are, the best parables are, kind of stories you have to put together, and so on.
Can you tell me a little bit about the talks that you give at conferences?
Yes. So I guess you could say I typically speak about three things. So one thing that I'm doing a lot lately is it's a concept that I call business voodoo. Now, voodoo has a bit of a dark connotation, I know, but voodoo is actually something that you just can't exactly put your finger on, but it's somehow a craft which does influences others. So I called it business voodoo because it's I talk about all the subjects within business voodoo, and that is about so how do you use simple technology to unleash the secrets of attracting and winning more business with it. So that's one topic I'd like to talk about. There's one that I really I'm most passionate about, I guess, is what I call the B2H, and that stands for business to human. And I think this transcends B2C and B2B because this is about making more human connections with technology. So whether it's somebody's B2B or B2C, they're still individuals. And before this was not possible, now it is. Now you can make that individual connection with those people. It's sort of the I would say it lies between B2H, B2B and B2C, but somehow we live in a world where we have the ability to make to scale up tremendously individual connections. So that's another topic that I'd love to speak about, and I'd like to give people a perspective on how the technological breakthroughs, most of the technological breakthroughs we make are because they serve our essential human needs. And our essential human need is to connect with each other. And then there's also, some people ask me to speak about, what does the world look like when 5 to 6 billion people come online? That's going to happen in the next 5 years. So that's another topic that I really love to talk about and it's more like about how businesses can get ready for this. Because
I'm interested in all of these topics. I would like to just sit in and listen to you speak about each and every one of those things. How do you get people to engage? Like, how do you keep their attention through the talk?
So first of all, I adhere to 18-minute TED Talk format.
Okay.
That's I mean, they're doing that at TED for a reason, so I think I sort of adopted that. I make it very visual. When you see my slides, they're usually pictures, maybe with a little bit of a caption on them, but often even not. I try to make the everything that's on the projected screen a very intuitive experience, and I like to use images that stir up certain emotions with people. The kind of emotion that I hope is that they're feeling while I'm saying what I'm saying. So, I'd like to get a little bit better on trying to stand still when I talk, but sometimes when there's a camera, that they don't like that because they're like back and forth and back and forth. But I always try to speak about maximum 3 things. I picked that up somewhere, and that seems like good advice.
Okay, so it sounds like you're using a combination of using really engaging imagery, use of movement while you're talking, and then try and keep your information concise with 3 points and don't speak for way too long. Is that right?
That, in the theory, is what I attempt to do. I can't always guarantee that I do it, but yes, that essentially that is the playbook that I try to play off of.
And when it comes to communicating, what advice do you have for our listeners, either through marketing or through doing presentations? What's one thing that's really important for people to remember about communication?
I think what we have to be very conscious of right now is that we're going to be living in an extremely multicultural world because of technology. So when I mentioned that we're going to have 5 to 6 billion people online, that's doubled the number of today in 5 years. It means that there's going to be a lot of new voices and people from different cultures, from Asia and from Africa. And so I also believe that language is not going to be an issue because technology will also help us instantly translate things. So I think one of the most important things in communication is to get a cultural awareness, an awareness of diversity. This is going to be very important in the future, I think. And it's a bit of an issue because you never want to be too neutral with your communication because then you don't really resonate with anyone. So I think it's also you have to sort of be careful on or be very diligent in what target audience you're aiming for. So that's going to be a topic that I think we're going to hear a lot about. And another thing about communication is just I really believe you have to just be yourself, and companies have to be themselves, the people who they are. And the reason for that is doesn't only resonate more on a human level, but it also eliminates your competition. Because if you're worried about competition, the best antidote to that is to just be yourself and be genuine. People will feel that they will appreciate it. And your competitors can't be you. And so if you make that human connection, then you sort of disqualify your competition.
That's such a wonderful insight. How do you cultivate that? And how do you encourage the companies to cultivate that, to really use your own voice and show yourself online?
It's difficult. It's probably the most difficult part of those assignments. For one, I always motivate people to flesh out their mistakes and talk about those more specifically what they learned from them. And as you may imagine in finance, which is I always go back to finance because it's still sort of my home industry, I guess. But this is the this if companies are brave enough to do this, they get extra confidence points by their audience. But that's not always intuitively felt that way by a lot of companies. So it's always a very big challenge to get them to do that.
To talk about their mistakes and what they learned from them.
Yes, this is a taboo, I guess, but it's so worth it because every mistake holds a lesson,
Well,
and
and it
those
really
lessons are
shows.
yeah, it's very useful also for the target audience, I guess, because the target audience, risk takes many dimensions, and uh, if you almost so you have the typical frequent asked questions, obviously, but what really lurks under the surface is when somebody, especially in an institutional or in a B2B space, chooses you as a business partner, they're sticking their neck out. And so if you could share with them the kind of mistakes you made, that they know that you have made them, that you've learned from them, but you also give them a reality check that they can probably trust you because you're not afraid to sort of lay out the whole risk spectrum. People need to know what the risks are before they can take a decision.
Be a little bit of a challenge to do. I think you're right that it does take a fair bit of courage to lay it down, but I think the benefit of building that trust with people is very important.
Yes, absolutely.
Last question, Baldwin. What are you most excited about when it comes to online marketing in 2016?
Okay, 2016. I think 2016 will be the year in which virtual reality became a mainstream product. So all the big tech companies are in an arms race to dominate this space. So you have Facebook with Oculus and Microsoft with HoloLens. I have a slide in one of my presentations where there's at least 30 devices that you can put on your face to have a virtual reality experience. So this is going to be that to me is going to be the big change for 2016. So that's probably even bigger than the internet itself, because this is, if you're interested in making that real deep connection, virtual reality is going to be the way to go. So that's going to be big. I also think that I don't know if this is going to happen in 2016, but it's definitely on for 2017, is where those same companies are going to provide billions of people with broadband internet in Africa and Asia. There's a few formats. Facebook will have this drone that flies around the world, of drones flying around the world, and Google will have their loon balloons, and that's going to be a big game changer, because then all of a sudden we're going to have an avalanche of new voices and minds online. That's going to be interesting. I'm quite excited about that, actually.
And how are you
Uh,
prepping for that? How are you prepping for that already for all these new people who are going to be joining the internet shortly?
oh, it's I don't think we're going to be ready for it. There is one thing though. I sound a bit American, but I'm actually Belgian, so I'm from Europe, and I think we have, especially us in Europe, we have an amazing opportunity with this because um, most people from different cultures in the world they actually like Europe or they admire Europe, and so I think for Europe it could be a big moment because if we know how to position ourselves online, all these people from Africa and Asia they're quite interested in what we have to say in Europe. So that to me is going to be that if you're a European company, this is the opportunity, and it's something that we should that's what we should prep for to make sure that we can get our messages out. And one of the biggest opportunities here, I think, is also to provide these people with knowledge and education. They're very hungry, and if as a business you can become their mentor in a certain area, that's going to be huge. So the best marketing strategy going forward, I think, for all these billions of people is to become their online mentor in whatever it is that you specialize in.
Thank you, Baldwin. It was really interesting to talk with you today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thanks for making time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
And listeners, if you'd like to dive a bit deeper into this podcast, there's a full article and transcript available on www.speakerhub.com, as well as links where you can learn a little bit more about Baldwin and his expertise in online and digital marketing. So until next time, this has been Esther Snip with Speaker Hub, and thank you for listening.